The maroon was called holiday. Yeah.
You went through some interesting training as
Well,
well, so it's all.
I want to
Everybody ready? Okay, let me call the meeting to order. Thank you for coming. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you please be seated, I'm going to be reading something for the invocation. Our country was founded by pilgrims who left England because of the fact of religious persecution, lack of freedom, basically because of the fact that these other folks wanted to tell them what they had to believe. We had a centennial celebration at the library a couple of months ago, and I gave a speech there, and I would like to go ahead and read most of this speech here tonight. Pam and Doug have heard it several times, but I think that it'd be good for everyone here and for those in the TV audience. There are so many people who made this day possible. 100 years worth of time, effort, and money by folks who are truly the silent majority. Folks who contributed countless hours of small works with the cumulative effect of your Army resulting in this fine library, and you have kept it going. The United States has the mightiest Army, Navy, and Air Force in the world, protecting democracy. But the real protection is from the army of you volunteers and supporters who daily defend our democracy through the power of books. Your work is truly the best defense we have to protect our way of life and letting the truth see the light of day. We still have differences of opinion, political challenges, and ideas that not all of us agree on. The right to dissent is one of the foundations of our democratic principles. That is good. We don't have to agree on issues, but we must agree that nothing, and I say nothing, should ever allow for the banning of books. If we allow books to be banned, we will be on the road to fascism. Just reread Ernest Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls and how Spain fell to Franco's fascism in the 30s. Understand that if we don't support freedom, we too might be saying, the bells toll for thee, America. You are our frontline defense to prevent this from ever happening. Do not underestimate your power. And I speak of that, of all of you out there and everyone on this board. Thank you. At this time, I've got one announcement. It has to do with the police department. I'd like to invite the police chief up, please, to bring all the board up to date and the citizens up to date of a very important incident that happened.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So just wanted to recognize Officer Stephen McPeters today, and also say that in August, I'm going to also be inviting some citizens as well as the victim of the carjacking crime that occurred. On June 1st, we had an incident where a suspect who had robbed a Hendersonville bank the day before and had been placed in NCIC as a wanted dangerous criminal. We received an alert that the suspect was in our location, and also at the same time got a active shooter or possible active shooter call. During the crazy, chaotic pursuit, which was all the way almost, it was to I-26, the suspect then got on I-26 and started going the wrong way. We decided to terminate the pursuit because of the jeopardy he was placing in everybody's lives into. So a great decision by the officers to do that. It's always a difficult balance, right? We know that there's an armed suspect who could hurt other people, but can he hurt him in the car that day, or can he go hurt him later on in another robbery? So it's always a difficult balance. They made the right choice, in my opinion. The suspect continued to flee even though we disregarded, and then he ended up hitting another vehicle. During that, when he hit the vehicle, his vehicle was no longer operational, and so he began to carjack. She does not like it when I said elderly. We had a long discussion. I called her, and she said, "I'm not elderly. I'm tough. I'm 70 years old." I said, "Amen. You are tough." But an elderly female, he slammed her head into the steering wheel, began dragging her out of the car as it was moving, and 3 citizens came to her rescue. And we got a call immediately as that was going on and turned around and went back and were first on the scene and were able to apprehend him without a lot of people getting, she had relatively minor injuries, and same with the car collision. But through this, we found that the suspect has admitted to the FBI to 5 bank robberies, but there is more than a handful that they're still investigating that they believe he's tied into, possibly 10, as well as a string of convenience stores. So this was a serious, dangerous suspect who is already out on 1 kidnapping and 1 bank robbery. And so for tonight, just want to recognize Officer McPeters, but I will bring him up in August so we can also officially recognize him so that we can do it in a more formal fashion. But very proud of the men and women who did that work that day. It was unbelievable, and they put their lives in danger as well.
And very well could have thwarted another robbery in Black Mountain.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Need to read the ethics statement. In accordance with the Code of Ethics adopted by the council, all council members have a duty to conduct the affairs of the governing board in an open and public manner, free of conflicts of interest. Is there any item on the agenda, the outcome of which will have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable impact for any council member, his or her family, or close business associates?
I'll be recusing myself from any decisions made on the short-term rental
Okay.
policies.
I'll make a note of that, Doug. Thank you. Does any council member have a financial interest in any public contract coming before the council today?
No.
There only being Doug, then all board members have a duty and obligation to vote on everything except for the short-term rental. Okay, proclamations. First proclamation, Pride Month in the town of Black Mountain. Whereas June 23rd marks the 54th annual celebration throughout the United States of America of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, LGBTQIA plus Pride Month. And whereas the month of June was chosen to commemorate those who led the 1969 uprising at the Stonewall Tavern in Greenwich Village, which sparked the modern LGBT movement. And whereas the town of Black Mountain believes in working together with all members of our community to facilitate open relationships, providing safety, dignity, and welcoming environment for our residents and visitors. And whereas the meaningful contributions made by our LGBT community enhance our town's diverse history and culture. And whereas the town joins the LGBT community in celebration of diversity, unity, and remains committed to treating all people with fairness and respect. Now therefore do I, C. Michael Sobel, Mayor of the town of Black Mountain, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim the month of June in the town of Black Mountain as Pride Month. Proclaim this 12th day of June, 2023. The next proclamation is very touching to me because the fact that I'm recognizing my best friend, known Ronnie for ever since before high school, and we've been very, very close friends ever since then. And not only of the proclamation, what he's done for the town, for the city itself here, but for all the time and effort that he has spent helping the library on that board. Whereas Ron Sneed began his tenure as the town attorney for the town of Black Mountain on December 14th, 1941.
81.
80.
Just seems like
He is an elder. Excuse me. Whereas while Ron made many outstanding contributions to the town of Black Mountain during his legal career, both through his legal practice at Snead and Stearns and as town attorney. Whereas Ron should be recognized for his tireless commitment to Black Mountain and the community. We recognize his 42 years of service and say thank you for a job well done. Whereas Ron Snead is known as a trusted friend, a man of strong integrity, a person with a sense of humor, and admired for his commitment and dedication to the community. Now therefore, be it hereby proclaimed that the town council of the town of Black Mountain, that Ron Snead is hereby acknowledged as having been a good, loyal, and faithful public servant of the town of Black Mountain. This proclamation expresses the deep appreciation on behalf of the citizens of the town of Black Mountain for the valuable services which he provided the town. That this proclamation is hereby presented to Mr. Snead, and a copy of the same should be placed within the records of the town of Black Mountain. Proclaimed this 12th day of June, 2023. Thank you very much, Ron.
Thank you.
Sign that, okay. Citizens' comments. I don't have a sheet here, so is there, oh, okay. Was thinking maybe that there weren't. Okay. We have one, I think, is it Andrew Clark? Clark, okay. Veterans Disabled, Veterans, post number 14. Your name again and address.
Andrew Clark. I'm a Buchan County resident, and I'm a Legislative Director for Bedingfield Scheidel, Chapter 14 Disabled American Veteran, and a Service Officer for Black Mountain VFW Post 9157. I want to start by thanking the town of Black Mountain for the overwhelming veteran support. Today I'm speaking on behalf of Disabled American Veteran Chapter 14 members that call this town home. DAV Chapter 14 is dedicated to a single purpose, empowering veterans to lead high-quality lives with respecting dignity. We accomplish this by ensuring that veterans and their families can access the full range of benefits available to them, fighting for the interests of America's injured heroes on Capitol Hill, and educating the public about the great sacrifices and needs of veterans transitioning back to civilian life. This mission is carried out by first providing free professional assistance to veterans and their families in obtaining benefits and services awarded through military service and provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs and other agencies of government. Second, providing a structure through which disabled veterans can express their compassion for fellow veterans through a variety of volunteer programs. Such programs at the Charles George VA Medical Center, we ask the town of Black Mountain to help support. Support like today's proclamation by Governor Roy Cooper that 12 June 2023 as Women's Veterans Day in North Carolina. Decades ago, a time just 5 days after the USMC allowing women to serve, 21-year-old female answered the nation's call. I've heard many say, once a Marine, always a Marine. You may know her as one of the Golden Girls, Bea Arthur, serving in the United States Marine Corps, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, Transportation Department during World War II. Paving the way for females that today serve in all military occupations. In honor of Women's Veterans Day in North Carolina, we ask, pass a resolution supporting veterans, Women's Veterans Plate, House Bill 427. Furthermore, pass resolutions supporting North Carolina veteran-friendly legislation and resolutions addressing veteran issues at a federal level, but greatly impacting veterans locally. While printouts and its environmental impact was not taken lightly, nor any attempt to reduce one's First Amendment right. Veteran support is vital to keeping the promise made for a promise that was paid. In closing, Bedingfield Scheidel, Chapter 14, Disabled American Veterans can be reached at dav14.org or by calling 828-367-0037, option 1. As an announcement, Black Mountain VFW Post 9157 will be hosting its annual golf tournament in September. With more information about ways to support and or participate for a great cause helping veterans in this area. Thank you for your time, and I yield back.
Thank you. All right. Josh?
All right, so you'll have, your next item on the agenda is communications from staff, council, commissions, and agencies. Mr. Nathan West with the Recreation Commission will not be here to do that report, so we'll cancel that one again. We did it last month too. So we'll just roll right into Mr. Bob Watts with our MSD report.
I get to sit down now. I used to have to stand up. And after this report from the police department, congratulations. I think, whatever I have to say will be useless, but anyhow. I did have to miss last month's meeting because of COVID. MSD is facing the same problems that every other agency is, and that's with the rising cost, The budget for next year will be $56.569 million. Proposed rate increase will be 5%. The long-term construction budget over the next 10 years is $496 million. Part of this is the Carrier Bridge Pump Station. We're still waiting on environmental reports on how to cross the French Broad River. Some options are to tunnel it. Some options are to build a cofferdam halfway across and do that portion and then move that cofferdam to the other side. But because of environmental delays, that project's gone up about 30%. The other major thing in the next 10 years will be the replacement of the RCB process, This is the main part of how we treat the sewer. We have done a lot of work on the front end of the plant. Screens have gotten smaller, so we're managing to catch more of the debris that comes down. But the final treatment, and then the final thing will be the incinerator that burns the sludge. So those are two of the things that are really impacting the budget over the next 10 years, We do have one new member, Martin Moore, who represents Buncombe County, is new on the board. Other than that, the board's pretty stable. And if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask me, if I don't have the answers, I'll be glad to get them back to you.
Bob, when you talk about this 10-year budget, which is basically a $50 million a year, that obviously MSD has to borrow money,
Yeah.
float
Yeah.
to be able to do that. Because we've been doing this for a good long time, and what is the net effect? So we're borrowing 50, but what are we paying off? Would we be paying off 10, 15, 20 million from previous work that was done back in 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010?
The last bond referendum we did was 2008, and I don't think that we have used up all of that. I don't hear anything about going out for new bonds in the near future,
Okay, so
But
this
I-
will be financed within the House.
Yeah, basically be financial, and plus
So
the bond.
therefore, more than likely, we're paying down old debt so that it makes room for us to go ahead and use what we would normally have used to satisfy that with payments, to now allocate $50 million a year.
Well,
just for
we're
new
paying
stuff.
down old debt. A lot of that money is invested. So we've gained about $6 or $7 million back off the investment of that money while we're not spending it, so, yeah.
Okay. Any chance of ever going back to digesters instead of going with burning the incinerator or burning sludge?
My answer at this point would be no, and it's because of the footprint, that we simply don't have a large enough footprint at the plant to do some of the more conventional things that you see in other towns. The process of taking this sludge and making it available for fields and stuff like that, just the market wasn't there,
The alkaline stabilization
Yeah,
process.
yeah. There was absolutely no impact from the fire on this budget because we got paid back for all of that in the insurance. There are RBCs that are available if we wanted to keep in that process. used ones, of course. They're not making them new. So I think that's kind of where we're headed.
That's questions I have. Anybody got anything else to ask?
I have the impression that you've been doing this a good long time, serving the town of Black Mountain in this capacity.
I started in 2010, but it has not been a continuous process, you know, so, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. I mean, this sounds like a hard job and kind of a thankless job, and I want to say thank you.
It's very interesting, as Mike knows, working with MSD. They're a very efficient organization, you know. And sometimes you've got to, kind of get away from your seat and go ask questions. Fortunately, we're given the authority to go and talk to staff members, and so it's interesting sometimes. If you've got a question, look them up and they'll give you the details. So it's been an enjoyable process. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Any questions?
Tom still the head daddy rabbit?
Tom's still the head daddy right now. We've had some head of engineering left a year ago, but I think engineering's in good hands.
Okay.
So
Sounds good.
I think everything's looking good at this point.
Good enough.
So
Thank you for your service.
thank you for your service.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah. Thank you, Archie. All right, your next item on the agenda will be Chief John Coffey with the Fire Department Annual Report. This looks very lengthy. I told him he had 10 minutes.
Savannah, does this work?
Yeah, it should. If not, I can click it.
All right, I'll try it in a minute. All right. All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. This is the 2022 year-end review for the Black Mountain Fire Department. So, who are we? It's clearly stated in the mission statement that we are a professional organization that saves lives, protects property, and serves providing the citizens the best possible service in a courteous, professional, and cost-effective manner. Our vision statement, Black Mountain Fire Department will be a safety-conscious professional organization while striving to be a leader in the fire service and the community through professionalism, dedication, and training. And we work hard to set goals for ourselves and to reach them as a team. Here's a list of our department values that we hold dear is honesty, reliability, integrity, loyalty, and professionalism. Again, who we are. And November 25th, 1912, a devastating fire swept through downtown, destroying Sutton Avenue, Cherry Street, and including the drain depot. The Citizen Bucket Brigade battled the fire until the fire truck from Asheville came in on a rail car to help put the fire out. So this motivated the citizens to review what happened and decided to establish a fire department in 1919. The first fire department was at the corner of Broadway and Sutton Avenue. And just like then, as today, the town grew and the department recognized the need for more adequate space. And so the efforts on State Street began to construct a new firehouse. So Black Mountain Fire Department functions on an annual budget averaging around $2.6 million. There's 23 full-time members that make up 4 divisions. The administrative division, which consists of the chief and deputy chief. The operations division consists of your battalion chiefs, lieutenants, engineers, and firemen, or firefighters, and your life safety division, which currently consists of 1 fire marshal. The department utilizes 3 rotating shifts working in 24-hour increments, which provides continuous coverage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 years, and including leap year. 2 stations, each with an engine company within the town limits, and 1 unmanned station in the East Buncombe District. Each of these stations on the engine company consist of 3 personnel, a lieutenant, a driver, or an engineer, and a firefighter. The battalion chief is stationed at Station 1, and he is responsible for the entire shift. So he will, that individual will ride back and forth in between the two stations depending on the call. So all of our employees are NFPA state certified firefighters. They're state credentialed and or nationally licensed emergency medical technicians, advanced technicians, and paramedics. And what that means is there's a state certification, but then you can also, if you go through the program and get the licensing, you can be nationally registered. We do have a few folks that are nationally registered. Black Mountain Fire Department is currently registered at the advanced EMT level, which was formerly known to most as the intermediate level, but the state made a change in the name, which means we're a higher level of EMS service of pre-hospital care above regular EMT, but just below paramedic. This is registered through the North Carolina Office of Emergency Medical Services. Annually, the department responds on an average of 2,350 calls. And we currently maintain a Class 3 ISO rating for the town of Black Mountain and a Class 3/9, which is called a split rating in the East Buncombe District.
What is the difference in that?
So the difference in that with a split rating is there's certain portions of the East Buncombe District which mostly has to do with distance and availability of hydrants. Yeah, towards that area. So the state will award a Class 3 for the station, but in certain parts, depending on your district, it's just a regular Class 9, which means that.
But all that is outside.
Yes,
The
that
city
is outside.
limits.
Yeah, the city limits is a straight Class 3. We have some fire service district demographics. The town changes with the seasons and truly cannot be measured by the 8,502 people within the town and the 13,983 citizens that live in the East Buncombe District that call it Black Mountain home. And the reason it's hard to measure that is during daytime, the populations increase with commercial workforces, public and private educational institutions such as our public schools and the college. Various recreational establishments also affect these numbers as we're coming up on the summer months, Ridgecrest. So my numbers are a little off on here, but the first few numbers with Camp Ridgecrest boys and girls with the 1,252 registered campers and the 1,800 at Ridgecrest and the 200 at Christmont. Those are weekly numbers. That's not the overall what comes here during the summer. So, but those are the averages throughout the summer of how many people extra are here in the district during the week. Same with Blue Ridge Assembly, around 585 a week. They'll have campers rotating through. All in all, for Craigmont Assembly throughout the whole year, there's 2,000 plus. So for all the weeks in the summer, if you add all those numbers up, that's a significant amount of population that comes into the district on a seasonal basis. Not only that, the tourism. So according to an article in Charlotte Magazine this past May, the Town Chamber of Commerce is quoted saying that the town draws 2 million people annually in just tourism. So there's no telling how many people at one time that we would have to serve while they're visiting Black Mountain. Here is the current organizational chart for the town of Black Mountain. We have the taxpayers and stakeholders at the top, mayor, vice mayor, and town council, the town manager, myself as fire chief. It's branched off into the deputy chief oversees operations of the fire department, and the fire marshal who handles our public safety, emergency management coordination, and public education. And under the deputy chief is our 3 battalion chiefs that control the Station 1 and Station 2, and each of those stations on the organizational chart have under them a lieutenant, an engineer, and a firefighter. So, now that you know who we are, this is what we do. Fire suppression. Prevent loss of life, defend loss of property, protect the environment, and in an effort to confine fires to the areas of origin. We also are in pre-hospital emergency care. So we are the first responders that stabilize patients prior to EMS arrival. So we will provide rapid first arriving response to medical and traumatic injuries. We address immediate life threats with application of interventions at the advanced EMT level, and we administer first-line medical interventions. We stabilize those efforts until transporting paramedics can arrive and bring those folks to the hospital. We also provide technical rescue. Our people are certified and experts in vehicle extrication, water rescue, confined space rescue, high-angle rescue, elevator and machinery rescue, agricultural rescue, structural collapse, and land search. We also we cover area emergency management for domestic preparedness and planning and response. So we cover mitigating natural, human-caused hazards and technological hazards. And the difference in those three, as you can see, is natural disasters are major floods, winter storms, and wildland fires. Human-caused is mostly terrorism, weapons of mass destruction, or any large-scale violent events. Usually that the police departments and law enforcement are the first line in those situations, but we do provide logistical support. Technological hazards, in this day and age, we're all under the threat of cyber attacks, especially public service such as fire and police. We also handle any hazardous material spills, factory fires, transportation accidents, and since we have a few dams, we do have pre-plans for dam failures and those mitigation efforts. We also handle code enforcement and fire investigation. In that division, we do education, informing commercial property owners of laws that protect their investments. We assist in plan reviews to make certain that drafted plans for new and renovated construction projects conform to the state fire code and adopted ordinances prior to project implementation. Public safety and well-being, we ensure preventative measures of safety are in place and in proper working order. So anywhere where the public goes, that's where our jurisdiction is. So we ensure that any public member will be safe in any establishment that they visit in the town of Black Mountain. We ensure compliance and good stewardship out of those commercial property owners by doing periodic required safety checks. And we also we are bound through general statute to investigate all causes and determine the origin on all fires. So we will collect data for the state, national databases to assist in fire prevention research and development, and we also assist law enforcement in suspected cases of arson or any use of incendiary devices. We also provide community risk reduction efforts, developing and organizing and implementing fire prevention and education programs such as the EDITH program, the fire prevention for individuals on the spectrum. That was a program that myself and a few others developed for this area with the influx of people, of individuals that are on the spectrum and those with, I'm trying to mind blank on the word.
Neurological differences.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. And also safety in the kitchen. Majority of our fires statistically start in the kitchen, so we try and put ourselves out of business by providing education to prevent those. Fall prevention programs. A couple of us are instructors through a program that's provided through the Council on Aging called Matter of Balance. We have partnerships with a few organizations, North Carolina Safe Kids, Department of the DAV, American Red Cross, and most recently Helpmate. We consider them a partnership since they came to the Safety Saturday, and there are several events that we would like to continue to include them in. We also provide CPR and first aid as a as-needed basis for the community and for the employees of Black Mountain. We offer fire extinguisher training for our commercial property owners for their employees and various other opportunities that we can educate the public in for community risk reduction. Our fire prevention which is our fire marshal's office, oversees life safety division, focuses on prevention, public education, and code enforcement, plan reviews, fire safety inspections, and fire investigation. We also oversee the Knox Box program, which if you ever notice the little boxes on certain commercial properties, it's got a little, it's more or less a box that we can access to gain entry into structures only during a time of an emergency. And so we have a few business owners that will participate in that program for us. We recently, this past year, started using Compliance Engine, and I'll get more into that later. And then this division also oversees special events. To get into some statistical data for the year of 2022, we had a total of 2,381 calls for the year. And this is broke down into several categories, our biggest being rescue and emergency medical services. So 49% mostly were EMS calls. As you can see, fire was 2.69, that's what we like to see, even though this is what we do for a living. But if we can eradicate the need for us, so be it. We had an increase in false alarms and false calls compared to last year. I've noticed when I was going over the data. I don't have any reasons for that on why there was an increase in fire alarms, but that's something that we're going to look into. But it was 13%. Good intent calls, and good intent calls is anything to where we're providing public assistance. Usually everyone calls the fire department for everything. People with plumbing issues, people with electrical issues, people who actually, and I'm not over exaggerating, need help with operating their computer will call the fire department and ask for help. So,
A quick question about the false alarm calls. Is that,
Yes, sir.
is that security systems and stuff that are triggering?
Yeah,
or is it-
yeah. Mostly, yeah, not malicious false alarms. These are malfunctions in the fire alarm systems.
Okay.
So,
And do you know roughly, I don't need an exact number by any means, but do you have any idea how many of those calls are coming, not the false alarm calls, all of them are coming from within town limits versus in the district?
I do have those numbers. I don't have that broken down, but I can do that for you.
Yeah.
And send that out. I'm sorry.
It's typically about a 60-40 split.
Yeah.
Down 60%,
Yeah, okay.
East Buckham 40%.
Thank you.
Here's our notification to on-scene times. We average 6 minutes from the time that we get the call from dispatch to the time that we're on scene. This is just some interesting data just showing the time of day and those averages. So throughout the year, we were really quick around 7 in the morning, which makes sense. That's close to shift change. So you have about 2 crews showing up at one time. So, and then around 7 o'clock in the evening, our crews were fairly on the ball on getting on the truck and dispatching. But for the most part, overall, they're meeting expectations and meeting the benchmarks that are set forth by the state and local. So here is some data on our response times between city limits, East Buncombe District, and our mutual aid. And as you can see, the mutual aid obviously is going to take a little bit longer because we're leaving our response area to go to other places. But we're still making it on average within 10 minutes to other people's districts. East Buncombe around 7 minutes depending on where the call is. And then within the city limits, we're averaging 4 minutes and 5 seconds from the time of the call to the time we get there. This was a 5-year trend on overall for call volume. If you look, we had a dip in 2020. And the reason for that, there was actually less EMS calls because of the chances of contracting COVID in the ERs and that the push with the hospitals saying if you're sick, just stay home. So there was a large influx or decrease in the amount of people that would call 911 to go to the hospital. But as you can see, after 2020, trends are slowly starting to rise back to pre-COVID numbers. This is just something to show you on overlapping calls. So what an overlapping call is when we have more than one call at one time. These are usually times to where, depending on the type of call, both our stations might be able to handle it, or there are times to where we've had, even last Friday, I believe, we had 3 or 4 calls at one time. I believe we may have called mutual aid for one of those calls. But it doesn't happen often, but just to show you some statistical data on the overlapping calls that we had for 2022, or over the past 5 years, sorry. And as you can see, this also, if you look at the graph, it also almost is in line with the amount of calls from the other 5-year data, that there was a dip in 2020 and then slowly starting to come back up. Speaking of automatic mutual aid, so Black Mountain Fire Department has automatic aid contracts with Swannanoa Fire Department, Broad River, Riceville Fire Department, Reynolds, and Asheville City. These contracts are reciprocal and assist us with providing quality service throughout the community and Buncombe County. Here are the last 5 years of data showing the mutual aid given versus the mutual aid received. In 2022, we were just under 60 calls of mutual aid received, but around 70 or so in mutual aid given. So we have responded more outside the district last year to assist other fire departments than received.
What happened in 21?
21, I wasn't here, so I really couldn't tell you. But that was very interesting to see. I honestly don't have an answer.
Okay.
But that is something I was curious and myself was looking into. So, just to show you, this is all the different fire districts within Buncombe County. And as you see, we're the big purple one on the far right. As we get closer, so this encompasses everything that Black Mountain Fire Department covers, all the way up to the Parkway and over towards the Swannanoa lines, which is the East Buncombe District. And as we get closer, the town of Black Mountain. So for training, we provide high-quality training to ensure proficiency while operating as professional firefighters. Administration oversees training to ensure compliance with local, state, and federal requirements, and training delivery is consisted of classroom, field training, on-site practical skills, online, and live fire training. So our fleet management, this is something that we had mostly discussed. I didn't want to put too much into this, but as you all know, our apparatuses are aged. So we are in the process of trying to mitigate that and get us where we need to be. But our maintenance cost is more than what it should be. Just today, engine 42 had to go into the shop. It's back now and back in service. However, it was the air brakes and there was a valve, and when Valley looked at it, they said the valve, it was just older and it was rusted. But they were able to replace the valves and do the maintenance that was required on it, and it's back in service. But that happened earlier today. I believe engine 45 is out right now. That happened today with a water leak that was discovered today. So it's just a never-ending cycle of we fix one problem, then another one just pops up. So, what happened in 2022? When I got here and took over as the interim chief, I noticed that we were not utilizing a system that we had been paying on, which was called Community Connect. And Community Connect is it's a part of our RMS system to where citizens and business owners can log in and create a profile. And in that profile, they can put as much or as little information as possible. But what it does is when they enter in that information and then we're called to that residence or business, that information will pop up on our screens through dispatch. They use banking software. It's as safe as it can be in this day and age. And the only time we can see that personal information is only when there's a call to that residence. And it's information such as how many people are in the house, or if they have a bedridden relative, they can say it's the third bedroom on the right as soon as you walk through the front door. So if there's a major incident or a fire, we have that information. We can go straight to, if they say, well, grandma's still in the house, we know exactly where to go because we have that information beforehand. It has other information such as for business owners where the gas shutoffs are, where the electrical panels are. We usually have that in our pre-plans on commercial properties, but it's very beneficial in the residential because we don't have a legal right to just go in and look at your house and see where everything's at. So for, to help us help the community, if they enter in that information beforehand, then it just helps us in our tactical efforts to mitigate and any incident that occurs.
How's the current,
Are we promoting?
Sorry?
Are we promoting that at all?
Oh, yeah, it's on our website, it's on our Facebook page. We have flyers in the lobby here, flyers over at the fire station.
what's the current utilization of that, Mike?
Well, I was hoping our deputy chief would be here tonight because he helps oversee that program, but he is having a grandbaby, so he left today.
It's important.
But I want to say we have a few hundred,
Okay.
but don't quote me on it. We, during 2022, we also tried to consolidate our RMS system. So we were using several different computer software programs. When we got here, we decided to go with this RMS system that more or less keeps better track of the data and analysis from an admin standpoint, but can also assist with keeping track of training records, our truck checkoffs, call reports, so everything that we need to run the fire department from a logistical standpoint, documentation and everything is in this RMS system. It's connected to the dispatch system, so all of our information comes through this RMS system. It's just consolidating all of our needs into one program and streamlining the department. 2022, we were able to fill all of our positions. It was the first time that the fire department was at full staff in 7 years. However, shortly thereafter, we had an employee who left to go to the VA hospital full-time. And right now, currently, I believe interviews are this Friday to fill that position to get us back up to full staff. So we have 3 candidates, very, very good candidates. So it's going to be a hard decision on Friday. After talking over with the fire marshal and reviewing the town as an entity, we feel the need to establish a town emergency management platform that incorporates all staff to ensure prompt and organized service during major incidents. And this concept includes a unified command model to be used as necessary. And what that means is all of the staff, from the town hall staff, even to the public works staff, and the Parks and Rec staff. We are making sure that they get all the proper incident command training. There's even training for the council as well. But what this does is, this helps with grants in the future that we might go for. But overall, it's an understanding of to where if we have a major incident in this area, that we can establish an emergency management model and have the state and the county supplement as a logistical support. But we should be able to handle most of our own incidents. The unified command model is incorporating myself and the police chief along with the town manager to where if there was a major incident, the 3 of us would run the event. And make the necessary calls to keep the community protected and have available resources ready and available at our need. To touch a little on this, and I talk about it here in the next couple slides, when I first got here, I did a risk assessment of the town to see what our major hazards were and what our capabilities are. But this coincides with that effort. So We partnership with veteran organizations, just as Mr. Clark, who was here earlier, he has been a large proponent in helping us do these partnerships with veteran organizations. They have a new name for it, but there was a program to where we could get a supplemental workforce that is paid for through the VA, but provide veterans who are usually deemed not able to have a normal 40-hour work week, but still be able to work and be utilized in the workforce in many capacities, to where no cost comes out of the town, and it's all run through the VA through their programs. So that's something that I'm pursuing and looking into for the town, especially since we have a large population of veterans in the area. We have a continued partnership with the American Red Cross. About once every 2 months, we have a blood drive. I was happy that this last blood drive that we did in May, I believe, yes, May, early May, they were able to meet above their goal for their donations. Usually donations have been lacking since COVID, but they were able to, I think they got 3 units above what they were shooting for. So that was good to hear. And basically all we do is we just help provide the, I guess, lack of a better word, the marketing for it. We get the word out and try and encourage the citizens and even the staff here to give blood. So to touch on the risk assessment findings, so that entails where I looked at our current capabilities as a department, our current available resources, both local, state, and county, and looked at frequencies and probabilities of occurrences of some of these hazards. Also looked at the severity of impact on the community, both physically and economically, and then with that data, looking at what recovery times and cost would be on an incident. Most of our hazards fall into natural hazards, and this is how they're categorized. Our major ones that are of more of a high frequency but lower impact, because we're kind of used to it in this area, is the tropical storms and the hurricanes that come through. This in turn causes major flooding. Second is the wildfires. Most of the major wildfires in Buncombe County have happened in the Black Mountain area over the past 10 years. And winter storms. We're no stranger to winter storms out here, but due to climate change, we have noticed a reduction in those temperatures, so we're not seeing it as much as we used to. Other things was the aspects was technological hazards, which mostly is industrial and transportation, since we have the train that still runs through Black Mountain, as well as I-40. So I-40 is also considered a technological hazard because of what is coming through Black Mountain on I-40 and the possibilities of tractor trailers and whatnot overturning. Also, our major industries such as Curefot and Ingalls Warehouse. So there are some hazards there, but those hazards at those two facilities are very low probability, yet high risk. And then we have human-caused hazards. Just looking at it is cyber attack. That's something that we always need to be on the guard for. Just in my 1 year of employment here, I have gotten emails from people stating that they were the mayor, wanting me to buy items for other people with the company card. So that was immediately reported to the town manager and sent to ADNS. And the other is the increase in community disruption. In the past couple years, we've seen a lot of civil unrest. So that is a potential out here considering the various demographics in this area of the county. Luckily, nothing major has happened. Expanding on training opportunities, we provide and would like to continue to provide, but last year we provided specialized training to increase capabilities of hazard and risk management within the community. This keeps the staff up to date on modern tactics and strategies and incorporates, we have an incorporation of higher education. Just this past year, we've had 4 staff members receive their associate degree in our field of work and 1 in his with his bachelor's degree. But this is essential for professional growth. And being so aggressive on our training really does increase job satisfaction and does help with retention efforts. We, this past year, have established succession strategies. So if we can't hire within, then we're probably doing something wrong. So what we do is we look for that talent within the fire department, and we really hone in on that training. We give them challenging assignments. And then what position rotating is those lower ranks having maybe an opportunity to do, if the firefighter, he might act as the engineer that day, just to get cross-trained. And what we're pushing for is to try and cross-train. Let the guy, learn the guy of the job of the guy above you and below you. Identification of leadership talent. So this is part of succession strategies, is assessment of managerial benchmarks, diversity, and avoiding the what I like to call the air design, is just because you've been here long enough, are you qualified for that next level? I know that's a hard thing to say, but we're a professional organization and we need quality candidates to provide continued professional service. Leadership development, internal mentorship programs, workshops, and courses specifically designed for fire officers, and then doing 360 assessments. And then in the end, that should get us to where we make sound succession decision for qualified and competent employees. What does the future hold? Proposal for land donations. There's a little project I'm working on for a future third station within the town limits. There's a few avenues for that, and granted, this isn't something that's going to happen in the next year or so. This is a future project that we're hoping to see how that pans out. But the town is growing, and those needs are just like it was in 1922. I believe it was 1922, where they outgrew the Sutton Avenue station and had to move to another one because the town was expanding. Fire truck replacement strategies, establish standardization and accommodate staffing models for future community growth. Starting more community risk reduction programs, giving back to the community through those programs. Establishing further partnerships. Right now, currently, there is a solar panel grant through Duke Power with Buncombe County. They came out and assessed the 2 fire departments, and we were potential candidates of receiving those solar panels that would help both departments, or both Station 1 and Station 2. So fingers crossed on that. And continuing to update our policies and our technology within the fire department. So with that, I say thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Any questions? All right. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Oh, I did want to ask, the Community Connect, is this something that has been notified in the water bill? Has that gone out with, just kind of on rotation?
But we can do it
Okay,
again, happy to. I know we have before.
cool. Could be worth doing.
Sure. All right, your next item on the agenda will be your consent agenda. The first item on the agenda, or consent agenda, excuse me, is adoption of your minutes. That'll be the May 4th, 2023 agenda meeting, the May 8th, 2023 regular meeting, April 26th, 2023 special meeting, May 3rd, 2023 special meeting, and the May 10th, 2023 special meeting. Item 5B will be a memorandum of understanding with the Wildlife Resources Commission on Mountain Heritage Trout Waters. This would be to designate some waters in town as Mountain Heritage Trout Waters. We would join 17 other cities and towns in western North Carolina that already provide this option to folks that can come in. Folks can come in and get a 3-day pass for $8 to fish these designated waters. And then lastly, on consent agenda, will be a budget amendment for insurance proceeds. And you've got a number of different insurance proceeds that this is dealing with, from some vehicle damage to some building damage from water, things of that nature. And that'll be your consent agenda.
On this Mountain Heritage trout waters, in order for us to get this, we have to vote for it. Are there any restrictions that are additional restrictions that are put on our waters?
No, sir.
Because of enrolling in this program?
No, sir. No, you already have, the majority of restrictions you have in town now are on the Swannoa River, which is a hatchery designated trout water. So there are restrictions that you must follow, and you'll need to check with the Wildlife Resources Commission on when you can and cannot fish and what you may
But
use.
there's nothing new?
No. Actually gives people the ability to do it for $8 instead of buying a full license.
Okay. Anybody got anything they want to say? Not, do I hear a motion? Accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second? We're not doing seconds. That's right, I keep forgetting. Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none? Okay. Second citizen comment? Anybody wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll go to no unfinished business, so new business, Josh.
All right, new business, first item 8A will be direction from council on short-term rental regulations. And we have our planning director, Jessica Trotman, to discuss that with you this evening.
Good evening. So tonight, we are just seeking direction on some draft language to add to the UDO related to short-term rentals. In your agenda packet, and I think you may have seen this previously, it's just a memo that I drafted that summarized our conversation on this topic previously, and I added a couple of questions just for a little bit of clarity. So I want to work through those for just a minute, and then you can tell me how you want to move forward.
Jessica, can I ask
yes.
a clarifying question?
Yes,
to start?
ma'am.
So what we discussed tonight is then what goes to the planning board? And so
Yes, as
what-
draft language. Yeah.
What's your goal for us about how specific we get versus what the planning board takes up in their work on this?
Previous council wanted to give planning board direction. So the more specific you are, the better.
Thanks.
So we can talk, the definition of short-term rentals currently exists in our code. And I went back and looked at that after some discussions this morning, and the principal use is specific to dwellings, which is preferable. I do want to say that means that people who are renting out campers, RVs, and making campsites in their backyard, that this would mean that that is not permitted under these particular regulations. So the first question is, when we discuss short-term rentals, do you want any adopted regulations to apply to only a full-time short-term rental, something that exists, that is the principal use, or do you want to extend them to temporary uses for short-term rentals? So if you decide to backpack through Europe for the summer and you rent out your house for 2 of the months that you're gone, do you need to have a temporary use permit and apply these regulations to those units as well? Or do you want them only to apply to those that is the principal use, being 6 months or more out of the year, it is a short-term rental? So that's the first question. Any short-term rental regulations that you adopt would be subject to a zoning permit, which is a $75 permit fee. That is what it is for all zoning permits. And we would like some direction if you would like to simply grandfather all the existing short-term rentals, but given the light touch of these regulations, if you would prefer to say existing short-term rentals have 12 to 18 months to come into compliance with these regulations. So you don't have to answer that question tonight, but that is some food for thought. One of the benefits of having the zoning permit is that short-term rentals that are not operated by a professional property management organization or through a web platform like your VRBOs and whatnot, we would requirements that they pay their occupancy taxes, and we'd have documentation of that. Right now, that's not something we're able to do. So the categories that came up in your conversations related to potential regulations fell into two groups, life and safety and neighborhood character. Under life and safety, we talked about the existing annual fire inspections. These are already required by the North Carolina General Statute. They are $50 a year. We're only able to perform those inspections though on known rentals. That's primarily through locally operated property management companies. So the types of things that are already required for life and safety include a functioning smoke detector, functioning CO2 detectors, and emergency escape ladders on the second story or higher bedrooms. Other things that are outside of that fire inspection that you might consider are requiring public safety and non-emergency numbers to be posted. You could also consider requiring the physical address of the rental to be posted, information about how to get to the urgent care, things like this. You could also require a local contact or a local, who could be a property manager or an owner, and that would be on file with the town. So if there was an emergency at this unit or we had issues, we would know who to go to. Under neighborhood character, the conversation largely centered around how to make a unit continue to fit in to the neighborhood. So we talked about you could have garbage and recycling information posted, when to take it out. You could require information about the noise ordinance to be posted. You could require bear-proof trash cans, or simply that the trash cans stay in the back and not just be sitting on the front porch. You could consider calculating occupancy on 2 people per bedroom. That is something smaller towns have done, but that might also be burdensome or difficult to manage. You could, the concern there being about overcrowding, we don't get like concerns about this. You could also just say you have to provide adequate parking for the number of guests. So people aren't overcrowding, parking on the front yard or something like that. So more than one way to get at that concern. You could prohibit signs on houses with the name of the property, or alternatively, because this is something that historically has happened in Black Mountain, people name their summer cottages, you could just limit those sizes, those signs to fit in with what is typical. And so tonight we're just looking for direction. Ron can tell me, I don't think we really need a vote. This language will come back to you in the draft UDO. The short-term rentals will be permitted in all districts. They will go on to the table of permitted uses as permitted with limitations. That's our new jargon for additional requirements. And so that's how it will be noted on the table of permitted uses. And we are holding space in the chapter about these limited uses. And we just have to get some direction from you all about how to craft that draft language to drop in.
Attorney Sneed, I believe that while I do need to recuse myself from any vote, I believe I can ask some questions. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, she's not asking for
Not
you
asking for any
to
vote.
spell it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, this board can ask Jessica amongst yourself what the public thinks about it, any input I can give you. I will tell you that the short-term rental statute that was started either in the House or the Senate earlier this year, it never came out of committee, so it does not look like the legislature this year will create any limitations. But I will tell you that what the biggest piece in that proposed legislation was that if it had passed, you would be prohibited from prohibiting short-term rentals in any residential district. And some of the earlier approaches, Asheville's, Waynesville's, and Waynesville's done nothing, but one of the thoughts was, can we push those out in the mixed use so they don't change the character of residential neighborhoods? Our legislature didn't push it through, but that was the first line, was you can't prohibit it in residential districts. So whatever this board writes, And as long as I'm talking to him, and then when Craig talks to him later, we're gonna have a severability clause in the short-term rental ordinance. But very much of what Jessica's outlined here, as far as the safety and change of character, those aren't far out of compliance of what that state statute would have provided had it passed. So if you're looking at what you put down there as ideas for guidelines, those very much fit what the legislature may impose on you in a year or two.
Yeah, I hear a big difference between prohibiting and having limitations or requirements.
Right, you can't say you can't have short-term rentals in residential, but they do spell out things you can do to help maintain, take care of safety, the character of the neighborhood. One of those is residency. What Jessica's tossed out there just as a number is no more than 2 people per bedroom. That statute might have increased that number a bit, but it's still, you're allowed to put a cap on that.
So Jessica, how would any of this be enforced? Or, like, how would we, what happens if someone didn't get a zoning permit?
The UDO will spell out the violations for violating any part of that permit. So there would be, the way it works now is you get a courtesy notice, and we say, we know you didn't mean to, but you didn't do the thing you're supposed to do. And 99% of the time, that fixes the issue. And then after that, there's fines that can occur. And at some point, people, they get the official notice of violation, and then fines can begin occurring. And at that point, it becomes the attorney's problem.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess the other part of that question is, we do a limited amount of proactive code enforcement. We do some. We do not have staff to do like full-time proactive code enforcement. So most of it is complaint-driven. And even with complaint-driven, we can sometimes barely keep up. So we'll see.
So if, for example, if we recommended the $50 or the annual fire inspection, would we have staff capacity to currently do?
That's already implemented through the fire department. That's required by the general statute. So I included that so you would know that certain aspects of life and safety are already covered by that permit. The difference now would be if we had this as a use that we issued a zoning permit for, we would capture some of these units that are not managed through the professional organizations who just give us, basically a to-do list of places that need inspections.
Okay.
Can we just clarify that? So if somebody is doing a short-term rental through a local Graybeard or some other local management company, they do fire
They
inspection?
do the fire inspection.
Otherwise, they don't have to,
There's,
correct?
my understanding is that it is the owner's responsibility to make that known to the fire department to get their inspection.
Okay. But this would be if we had some sort of permit process for them.
That's right.
No matter how light or heavy it is, you could put that in, that's a requirement.
That's right. And I have seen some other small towns in western North Carolina, some of these requirements about, where if you want information posted or included, that information has to be included with their zoning permit application and sign an affidavit that it is there. So there are some really good examples. Beach Mountain has some really good examples of how to manage that workflow, to gather that documentation to see that it is being implemented.
I had a citizen suggest today something that made sense to me. If we are gonna include some safety regulations, that we might want to post the phone number that you have to call to find what the current burn status is, and tell them they have to check before they light up the fire pit outside. And also maybe some instructions on how to build a fire. I'm just saying, basic.
Yes, yes.
Some of them may not.
Training program for that too.
Very good.
I likened some of these to like we have, every area that people are, using short-term rentals has unique conditions that influence, we have a bear population. At the beach, they have the turtles, where they remind you to turn the lights off and things like that. So there are some analogous things to be aware of that people are here to enjoy but may not know how to best interact with. Don't leave your groceries in your car. The bears are coming, yes.
I had questions about the implications of bear-proof trash cans as we've been having conversations around standardizing waste receptacles and what implications that has for sanitation. So I don't know at what point is the best time to ask those questions, but since we're talking about bears.
We are talking about bears. I think if that's something you want to consider, there's no harm in including it. We can always take that out. I think if there's something you want to consider, go ahead and put it in there. And we can talk with sanitation. The only reason I suggested that is something you may consider is the nature of people not knowing necessarily how to manage a trash can with bears around.
Absolutely. I think it's a good idea, and I want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about, how that plays out.
And we have
for
folks in
staff.
town who use them already. I've seen some
yeah.
fantastic videos of the bears throwing them around. So in general, if you're okay, if the biggest piece out of this, I'm curious to know if you're looking at these applying only to STRs as a principal use, and you just don't want to bother with temporary uses or subordinate use. Or if there's anything on this list that gives you particular heartburn that we can just take out now, and the rest we can craft into something for the draft UDO.
And the temporary being that divide between more than half-time
That's right.
use as a short-term rental.
Well, I don't want to create an administrative burden that's impossible to manage, but on the other hand, safety is safety.
We'll figure it out.
Good.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of these things I think are okay, and some, like the grandfathering in, I think 12 to 18 months is too short. I would suggest a longer grandfathering. People have bought property based on rules, and I think that could place an unfair burden if we're totally changing it.
And we don't have to have that to draft the language, but it's certainly a conversation that we'll
Yeah.
need to have.
I mean, that's what I'm just trying to understand. We're not really gonna work through all these things right now. You're just wanting broad strokes, is that correct?
Yes, if there's anything in here that you just really super hate, don't want to see happen, and the temporary use in principle. The rest, I think we can get pretty close, because this is going to come back to you, and you'll be able to consider it in the whole context of everything else.
So I don't like the local contact provision. That's my view.
Bill, if it's any help, had that statute passed, that would have been in it, the state requirement. The point being, I think, if you've got a short-term rental, not handled by an agency, so you can call Chip up and say, hey, what's going on? And you're in Europe and something goes wrong, where does the town turn to somebody to be responsible for correcting the problem? I think that was the point of having a local contact.
Yeah, I really see that as an asset, so.
Are we talking about the house is on fire, or are we talking about a loud party?
Either one will do. But obviously, it's a loud party, the police can go directly to the inhabitants. But what if there is a true emergency with the building? Who do you contact if I'm in Europe?
But not your tenants are out of control.
Possibly, but I don't think that was the point. Again, I'm not arguing for or against it, but that was the purpose, is somebody, who you can turn to find out about the house or whatever. Say it's not rented, it's sitting there, smoke's coming out the windows, who do we call?
I'm sorry, Attorney, you were saying that the original draft of the state law would have required that?
Would have had that contact requirement, yes,
It would have had it.
yes.
I
If
do-
we have, somebody has a long-term rental, that's not a requirement, correct? I can.
Yeah, we have no limitations on long-term rentals, correct?
And I also would, as I heard Jessica say before, as far as complaints, we basically haven't had complaints about any of these things, for the
Yeah.
most part.
We've only had a handful of complaints, and they were very minor.
That was gonna be my question. What complaints do you hear the most?
I've had maybe 5 in 6 years specific to short-term rental. And they were things like, and I don't want to downplay people's concerns, but it's, literally I can hear them talking in the backyard. They used ugly language when they were loading up the car. There's not been, I don't think we've thrown major parties. It's a pretty laid-back group most of the time. We've not had, I don't hear from the fire or police chief that we're having major issues that are unique. And I think that's sort of the differentiation. There is a noise ordinance to handle those sorts of things.
I will say that just because they're not calling the town doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't experiencing certain noise issues. I mean, I know,
That's true.
for example, across the street, our house backs up, or that house backs up to a STR with a swimming pool, and they have parties there all the time, and she just takes it in her own hands and yells at them through the window and stuff like that.
Right.
So,
That's one way to do it.
Instead of calling the town. So, I mean, I think that she would love to, for example, see some of these enacted, even though she hasn't reached out to them.
When I was over at Sweet Birch, a lot of the residents over there are frustrated because of the fact of the parking. Because the parking ends up being, if you admit in Sweet Birch, there's very limited space, and the parking then takes over the sidewalks.
Yeah, I guess I see having the local contact, the difference between how that might be handled for a long-term rental versus a short-term rental is that you have this primary resident or someone who is involved in the community in more of an ongoing way than people coming in for a week or a long weekend or something. And so that remains appealing to me. But I hear the question of, what's the difference there and what problem is that solving? I think we haven't talked about this yet, but in here it talks about a set period that a permit would be available versus valid until the property has a change in use. I think a set period gives us a good opportunity to kind of review this with some kind of frequency, if there are updates that we need to include along the way.
We always can go back and tweak this at any time and review the data. All of our existing zoning permits are good until such time that the use does change. Some people are surprised when STRs need a zoning permit to go back to a residential unit, but we need to alleviate them of any of these regulations because we are prohibited from imposing such things on a rental property or owner-occupied residency.
I do think looking at, number of individuals based on parking availability kind of makes the most sense in how that impacts the neighbors and that kind of thing. I personally, I haven't really heard complaints about signs on houses, and so that one to me is I don't know that we need to regulate that, but other thoughts?
The cars are easier to observe as opposed to how many people are in those bedrooms.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah.
would it be only what can fit in a driveway, or like driveway plus?
We would have to,
X amount
on that application, they would have to say how many dedicated parking spaces they have, and that's what we would just have to hold them to. So that,
They kind of make a commitment. What if they say 8, we're gonna use the whole block?
not
mean,
acceptable.
Right, like you,
Yes,
you
be on
can't,
site.
okay, yeah. So it would be like a driveway or a parking pad or,
Right, single-family residence has to have 2 parking spaces to be built in the first place. Sometimes people have more, sometimes they have a drive around in the back, but need to be able to accommodate your guests
Yeah.
without inconveniencing your neighbors or creating an, this, what it looks like a used car lot in the front yard.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just assuming so that we'll have even if you take all these and you put them in there, we have a chance to further debate it.
Absolutely.
And so that's okay from my point of view, but I'm not committing myself to supporting any of them, but that's fine, put them in there,
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned, but.
I also wanted to make sure that I reflected back to you the general consensus of your conversation
Yeah.
and make sure there was anything that I didn't
Yeah.
missed or went too far with, because I tried to shape it to fit into zoning regulations and to go into that draft, and the draft will come with you with all the other limited use activities.
I think that's fine.
okay, thank you.
Good?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, your next item is gonna be 8B, discussion of potential purchase for expansion of the public parking lot. This would be down on, just below the train tracks there off Sutton. I provided to you a little handout today that's got a map on it, and then some language from the parking and circulation study. The front page that has this on it, just the typing, just tells you how many on-street spaces we currently have and how many off-street spaces we currently have. Now, I will tell you that the 225 and the 7, as far as off-street parking go, we are no longer using the Methodist Church parking. They have said they do not want to do shared parking any longer for a couple different reasons. So those numbers have already been taken out of that, okay? So these are the actual numbers based on the study when they were counted.
And we lost probably, what, 50 to 60 there?
71. And I think at a meeting or two ago, I actually gave you, which is I think it's in the packet again, that's the information where I'd sent to the property owner the letter and the response from them on what they would require of us if we have further interest, which would be an appraisal and an offer letter.
Josh, on this map that was included in the agenda packet, do we own 4470 as well?
Correct.
So we own both of those parcels?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there space on the backside of 4470 to add a few spots?
Do I know?
On the backside of that larger,
Oh, yeah.
so potentially we could add some few spots there if we felt the need to do that.
I mean, basically, that if the council was to approve to look into this, which is what we're talking about tonight, that if we were able to purchase this from them, we could add immediately 10 spots just on the grassy area. And without even going into 447 zero. But one of the things that I think is so beneficial about this is to look down the road and the fact that we would need that extra land if in fact we were going to build just a single deck. And if we built a single deck on that, that would provide over 50 additional spots. Now granted, that's down the road, but at least we would have the physical land to be able to build it on. And that if and that if we could work out something with them, because what do you think, Josh? We can get this thing appraised and surveyed for less than 5,000,
I would think so.
and then we could make an offer to them.
We could also build a deck down where we have a lot of parking spaces already, right? Down by the maintenance, I mean, if we were talking about building decks.
Yeah, but that's a long way to walk, and that particular.
Well, we don't have to acquire any land to do it.
Well, that's correct, but the cost of acquiring this land, I think, would be fairly minimal. I'm thinking that when you just look at talking to appraisers, that you're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 20, 30, maybe $40,000, and you can pick up 10 parking spots immediately.
I would hope it would be cheaper than that, but
I know, I'm just trying to throw big figures out there, you know. Because this doesn't adversely affect the bank or whoever owns that, because it doesn't even do anything with the entrance there.
No.
So I have a couple questions. And I'm sure you're not surprised.
Go ahead. Sure, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. This issue came up at the council retreat, and it got no traction whatsoever. Certainly didn't make it into the top 5. So I guess I'm a little surprised that we're revisiting it again. And number 2, we just spent weeks and weeks and weeks going through the budget and cutting things, cutting expenditures and postponing expenditures of things we all think we need. So I'm confused as to all of a sudden we've got money to do this and we couldn't do those things.
Well, it's up to the council to decide that, sure. But as far as looking at a business decision, and that's some of the things that this board is charged with, is to do a business decision. When you have an opportunity to be able to get some extra parking for town, for just a minimum amount of money, I think it's worth looking into. I think it's worth looking into just to see spend the money and then try to negotiate with these people. You have opportunities in the future to say, well, no, we don't want to do that. But you're only looking at spending $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to be able to, just to start some negotiations.
I guess I'd rather stick with the things that made it to the top 5 at the council retreat. Yeah, I mean, this didn't get any traction. It didn't even make the list, so why it gets to bypass all the others and go to the top, I'm not.
Mainly because parking is an issue, or at least that's
You
what
brought that up
I
at the
see.
retreat, but nobody voted for it.
Well, but no one even knew of this issue. You know, I mean, we're not talking about trying to go out and buy an acre of land, which would be 300,000
Okay.
or more to buy. You know, here we're able to pick up a little bit of land, hopefully, for less than $30,000 possible. I just think it's worth looking into, but it's up to the council what they want to do.
Since this was added to the agenda or requested to be added a few weeks ago, I've been keeping my eye on the lot here every time I pass by. And let me preface this by saying that in the last 7 days, in the last week, I've heard from 2 store owners that are concerned about parking downtown. But what I think everyone, including them, agree with is that it's not so much the available parking spots in the broader downtown area. It's the density of parking within, or the limited parking on Cherry Street and on Broadway and on kind of some of those key areas. And I was speaking with Jessica about this the other day, and one thing that she mentioned is we currently don't have any sort of parking rules in place that encourage people who are there all day to use some of the outer lots, the ones that you would maybe park at and then walk all over downtown, versus the prime spots right downtown where if you're grabbing a bite to eat or a cup of coffee or popping into a shop, those are kind of better use for an hour or two versus all day, leaving your car there. And so I know that this is kind of a side tangent from what we're talking about here, but I would be very interested in exploring ways to better utilize the parking that we do have, and setting up some incentives to get people who are parking for longer term to utilize some of the exterior lots, and to free up some of the space directly downtown for shorter term use.
What is the current conversation or relationship like with downtown businesses around where their staff or employees park? Or, I mean, is that even a conversation that happens? I don't
It's not a lot of
know.
conversation I have with any business owner. The Chamber of Commerce may have more of those conversations, but I don't have
Yeah.
hardly any conversations with them regarding that matter.
Just makes me think of, ways that we incentivize or, nudge or stronger actions towards,
Well, if you're gonna encourage
making
business,
those parking spots turn over more quickly.
if you're gonna encourage or enforce or try to come up with new regulations for business owners not to park and stay down there, you're gonna need someplace for them to park. And this right here would give them someplace, they may have to walk a little distance, but at least this is an alternative for them to go ahead and to free up spaces close to their businesses, and then just have to walk up there. But I mean, if you're gonna tell them that they can't park there, I mean, where are they gonna park?
They
Well, I-
can park down by Public Works.
Yeah, I
There's a
think
lot of
those
space
lots are-
down there by Melly Max.
They're really underutilized
Yeah.
spaces. Including this lot, I would argue, I mean, just by driving around and looking at it, most of the time, this lot was pretty empty. And I know it's tucked away, and signage is kind of limited, there's no streetlights. I parked down there on Saturday night, kind of towards the end of it, and it was dark back there. So I think there's so much we can do to be pulling people out of the on-street parking and into some of our lots that we're not doing currently.
I don't think expanding this lot is a bad idea, so that's not what I'm trying to convey. I do think that we have some options to better utilize what we have, better signage, I think we've talked about this before, and then some of the, encouraging turnover at those on-street parking spots that we could implement for, I would say, some of the same money that we're talking about, but as a known entity, rather than, having to pay for a survey and then explore it and then negotiate and not knowing how much we might end up spending to pursue that.
My only thing is, I think, once again, here we are, we're gonna underutilize what we already have. And here we are gonna throw money at something else when we don't already use what we already have. And that's where I have a problem.
Anybody else have anything to say? We move on? Looks like the council wishes to move on.
Okay. Item 8C, I'll ask Tammy Holland, our finance director, to come up and go over this ordinance amendment for American Recovery, I can't remember that acronym, I'm sorry, ARPA, American Rescue Plan, that's it. I'm getting my, the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act from the early 2010s. I'm confused, I apologize.
Mayor, council. So I will mention that the ordinance number is 023-09 instead of 08. This is just an amendment to change the ordinance to the actual funds that we got versus what we had budgeted. We had budgeted 2390 and we got 2601, 20854. The rest of the ordinance is breaking it apart by salaries, and this is based on the salaries that we've already expended this year. So those expenses are accurate. So we wouldn't have to do any more amendments, and this would move them, it would give us the ability to move that money into the general fund, what's remaining.
And is this, this $211,000, is that more money than we thought? Or is
Yeah.
it just reclassifying?
No, it was more. We originally budgeted $2,390,000.
Okay,
I think
that's
because,
the
yeah.
way I took
Yeah.
it. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding it correctly.
We originally budgeted 2.39 million, but we've always talked about 2.6.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
even when we've done
So
our,
this is
done our
just-
calculations as a board on projects, we've always talked about 2.6. So I don't want you to think that we've got an extra $211,000.
Oh, I had some ideas.
I think when we originally did the first ordinance, there was sort of some confusion on
Okay.
what exactly we was getting, when we was gonna get it, and, so we did the best we could with the federal government saying, you have to do this
Right.
before we're gonna send you any money.
So this
So,
just lines up, basically.
Yes.
We don't have extra money, we're just.
No.
Okay. All right.
Any questions about any part of it?
Do I hear a motion?
I move the council approve the amendment to the ARPA grant project ordinance.
Any more discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, next is item 8D, which is fire apparatus bid approval. I'll call up John and Company. Did I say? Chief Coffey has with him two of our battalion chiefs, Mr. Bobby Davis and Mr. George Vaughn.
So, Mr. Mayor, Council, these two individuals here, two of our battalion chiefs, are the ones that went and had hands-on with the stock truck that we're looking at purchasing. Chief Bond here was appointed by the truck committee to be the spokesperson to talk and answer any questions that you might have on the truck. I did provide council tonight with some data on the truck itself. On the first page, with the total cost, the down payment, and currently we received from the town's bank an interest rate of 4.8% from Truist. And then there's some numbers down there over 5, 10, and 15-year finance with the total interest paid. The next page, just to look at the packet, is the schematic for the truck. The third page is from Custom Fire to talk about the savings that Green Bay, Wisconsin Fire Department was able to the savings that they made on apparatus that are like this vehicle. And then the last page is just that's something that came from a municipal bid website that just explains the difference in fire trucks. I thought that would be beneficial to council when we're discussing fire trucks in the future, just to have a little bit of clarification on the different types of apparatus that are used in the fire service. So I will turn this over to Chief Bond.
Mr. Mayor, council members, as you guys are aware, we were tasked with trying to find a stock replacement truck which would serve as a temporary stopgap to mitigate some of the pretty intense maintenance issues that we've had over the last few years as a result of our aging fleet. We found this, which was manufactured, like Chief Coffey said, by Custom Fire Apparatus out of Wisconsin. Chief Davis and I traveled to New York to look at it, and it meets a great deal of the needs of our department currently. We're not going to find one in a stock capacity that meets them all, just because of the pretty varied nature of our district here. But this one hits a lot of the high points and I'll cover those pretty briefly, and if you have any specific questions about it, we'll be happy to answer those. The cab here, oh, sorry, that's fancy. The cab here meets all the modern safety regulations that are imposed upon fire trucks. A lot of our current fleet does not meet those just because of the age on them. But this meets all the current safety standards, which of course improve our safety and our ability to render aid. One of the big things we've looked at on both this truck and the spec truck is the hose bed, where you can see I'm standing there. Our current trucks, that hose bed is sitting at about 9 feet tall. That one there is actually lower than it appears. As you guys could tell when I walked up here, I'm not a tall man. And this picture was kind of taken over my shoulder. That bed sits at about shoulder height on me. And the reason that's important versus the 9 feet is if we have to get hose off of that truck, we have to climb up it currently. Obviously, that creates a bit of a safety concern in the ice and the wet weather. But this also allows us to more quickly deploy hose lines off the back of a truck. With modern construction, a house is considered safe to be in for about 4 minutes. Safe is probably the wrong word, but livable for about 4 minutes after ignition. So for us, it's very important that we're able to deploy hose lines very quickly. And this allows us to do that at a much greater speed. With the picture on the right, you can also see that the ladder placement is similar. It's about my shoulder height, which allows a person to walk up, take that ladder off, and not have to come from above their heads to pull it off. Again, improving our safety and improving our ability to render aid quickly. One of the things that we were very impressed with this truck was not only the build quality, but the ease of maintenance. We've got the engine on the left and the pump on the right. Both of those you can essentially walk into. That's going to decrease our maintenance costs in the future. We're going to pay less on labor when things inevitably do go wrong because of that ease of maintenance. We spent quite a bit of time. I don't know if you guys, I know some of you, I'm sure know Chief Davis's history as far as mechanical work. He inspected all the build parts of it pretty thoroughly, and we found it to be a very, very well-made truck. We found very little in the way of oversight from a manufacturing standpoint. That's basically it in a nutshell. Like I said, if you guys have specific questions about it, I'd be happy to answer those to the best of my ability.
Is this manifold in good shape? Are we gonna, isn't that the thing that breaks all the time?
Yes, that should not be an issue on this truck.
Have we dealt with this manufacturer before?
We have not dealt with this manufacturer before. They're a fairly regional manufacturer in the upper Midwest, and if I'm being honest, that was one of our concerns. That said, the previous manufacturers that we've used in this area have a fairly decent track record of not meeting our needs. Through the process of researching this, we contacted several fire departments that have these trucks. We made it a point to speak to guys who are actually using the trucks and not a chief somewhere who hasn't been on one in 10 years. And we, for the most part, got overwhelmingly positive reviews on this manufacturer. One of the concerns about the region that they're in not being the same region as ours was serviceability. To meet that concern, they've contacted Valley Truck down here. Valley would be handling all of the maintenance and warranty work on it. And they're actually sending, I think, 3 of their technicians to additional schooling to ensure that their knowledge base meets this apparatus.
Good, because we haven't had we had some bad luck here lately with purchasing very, very, very expensive fire trucks that were supposed to be the cat's meow, and apparently didn't turn out to be. But this one sounds good, because it looks like we're saving $100,000.
Yes, sir.
Is this the same as the modular truck that was mentioned?
This is the Lego truck, yes.
This is the Lego truck. Okay. And so is this still a stopgap truck, or do we think that it could be a long-term solution for?
So, go ahead, George, I'm sorry. I feel like this is certainly a stopgap over the next few years. Like I said earlier, I touched on a little bit, that our district is a challenge. We've got downtown areas, we've got 8% grades going up in the mountains. When we leave the town of Black Mountain, there's much less regulation on road widths and things like that. When manufacturers make these stock trucks, they're basically producing something for you to see what they're capable of and inspect their work in a manner that you can sort of look at before you commit to a 2 or 3 year build process. When a manufacturer produces these trucks, of course, they still want to sell them to somebody. And because of that, they try and produce a truck that has more general appeal than something we might purchase for our district. Because of that variability that we have, we can't necessarily rely on trucks that have general appeal, if that makes sense. Very few municipalities in this country are going to have 8% grades and downtown areas, and we need something, I think, long-term a little more specialized. But I do believe that this truck would certainly be able to fill in, on a first-out basis over the next few years until something is built. And then I think after that, it would certainly be a completely usable reserve apparatus when inevitably something, fails in the future.
So when you say a few years, you're talking what, 10, 15?
Generally, these trucks stay with us for about 20 if we follow, industry recommendations. They generally stay on as a first out, everyday kind of truck for about 15 years. And then they're sort of relegated to reserve status, when things break and stuff like that for a further 5.
And so we do have 2 trucks already now that are built to handle the 8% grades.
Yeah, the trucks we currently have meet,
So they
do
could be
that.
the first out, and then this would be the third one if we needed it.
Well, the issue with our second out truck is that our truck at Station 2 is it is aging and the maintenance bills are quite high.
And how old is that truck?
Is it
I thought you said
2004.
2004. Okay, but don't we have 2 other trucks that are newer than that? Seem like
Well, we have engine
2017,
4, which is,
2000.
engine 4 is 2017, and then engine 45 is a 2012. The issue with engine 45 is it's a 2-person cab. We run, as Chief Coffey alluded to earlier, 3-person engine companies, which is generally considered a minimum. Plus, the other issue with 45 is it doesn't have air packs in the seats, which basically means that if we pull up on a fire in that truck, we have to get out, get dressed, put air packs on before we actually go to firefighting. With a truck like this and the one it's replacing, hopefully, we are able to be dressed and ready to go as soon as the parking brake is pulled. We're exiting that truck and pulling hose lines off. We're not having to stand in the yard and get
capacity of
dressed.
the engine and the drivetrain, what's the difference in that and the engine that we have now that is capable of going ahead and handling the 8% grade?
They are all similar. They're all within.
Excuse me?
They're all similar. The
Okay.
2 engines that we have as main engines right now, and they're very similar as far as power, rear end ratios and stuff like that.
Good.
How long does it take to get one?
This one, there are a few changes that we would need to make because of the terrain. If you look just next to that tire on the right, there is some piping that sits there, which would work very well. This is an example I was talking about, would work very well in a completely urban area, but it sits about 6 inches off the ground. With some of the more challenging terrain we have, it would be removed inevitably one way or the other. So there are a few changes that would need to be made to this truck, which are reflected in the pricing that you guys have already been given.
These are with the modifications.
That's with the modification. Yes, ma'am.
So it's like a year or?
No, it's,
So we actually do have the representative from the company here tonight to answer those exact questions, but I believe it was August.
You can be as soon as August.
when you're talking about the specification process, building one out, you're looking, depending on the manufacturer. Of the 4 manufacturers we looked at, the shortest was like 500 days. The longest was 1,140, if I remember correctly.
So when you talk about this being kind of a generalized truck, I mean, where ideally does this fit in the fleet 10 years from now, in terms of when would it be used? When would it be useful?
Go ahead.
As soon as it's delivered to us, it would be replacing engine 42.
Okay.
At Station 2 as a first-line engine.
I guess I realized I didn't ask that question the way I wanted to. What circumstances could it be used? Like the grade is an issue where would it make it up the 8% grade? Could it be used downtown? Are there areas that it would not be able to travel and be utilized or for
This should be
calls?
able to be utilized in every area of our district.
Okay,
I mean, we have challenges in the trucks we currently have. That's sort of the nature of working in this area.
yeah, okay.
Good.
So it would be able to be used, ideally, we would spec it out to be a little bit more powerful in certain situations, but there's nothing necessarily.
Yeah, the specification truck makes it to where we are very specifically building a truck for this district. This truck, like I said, I believe is completely usable, and I believe is usable in the long term. It does have some things that would certainly be different if we were building it from scratch. But it is a completely usable piece of fire apparatus for us.
But even if you had a really super duper special truck that you wanted to make, either one, either this one or the new one, could make it to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, yes, I may not have made that clear enough, but my concern with this truck has nothing to do with pulling a grade.
Okay.
Good.
And finally, Josh, on the financing side, in your proposed budget for FY 23-24, there was a truck. Am I correct about that?
It's not in the budget, it's in the capital.
It's in the capital improvement.
My thought was we'd get to this after budget and have these discussions, but unfortunately, it's happening right now. So this would be my suggestion. I mean, we have the money, you could pay cash for this truck now, although I wouldn't suggest doing that. I would suggest keeping some money in that capital reserve fund, completely up to you. But putting a down payment on this truck pretty much immediately, so we can get it. Now, what you have on the agenda for the apparatus bid approval, I would be asking you to reject those bids at this time.
While we're on that, I'm thinking of folks that are maybe watching online or don't have the agenda packet in front of them or reviewed it and don't have what we're looking at on the screen and stuff. So we got 4 bids for 4 different trucks, but this truck that we've been talking about is the 5th. Like, kind of, it's not on our chart here. Yeah,
That was not, this truck that we're talking about right here was not part of
yeah,
that process. So
Yeah.
we were bidding for a truck that met our specific needs.
The custom
with
built.
The custom build, but at the same time, we also needed something fairly quickly to get us out of the situation we're in. And we did look at several other apparatus other than this one that were also stocked, but they did not meet the needs of the department nor the community.
If you end up being okay with this stock truck, my recommendation would be that you would be okay with putting down 300,000 and then we come back to you with financing. If you're okay with doing that, if not, then
What would we do with the other 500,000?
We're talking about having a truck built, so that's gonna take.
Yeah, but you're
years
talking
to do.
about, these gentlemen here are saying that this truck could last a good 10, 15 years. So why would we go out and buy a brand new truck after this one?
I don't think that's what they're getting at here.
No, this truck, we can keep long-term as a reserve vehicle.
Yeah, but now we're talking about four vehicles, now we're talking about 4 fire engines.
We've got a lot of engines that we need to replace. And
Yeah.
we have a few engines that don't meet the current tactics. They're only 2-seated apparatus. Which,
we currently have 4. And 2 of them, we've been talking about replacing or upgrading. Is that right? In the nearest future? Okay. You can correct me.
Unfortunately, our fleet is a very complicated situation.
Yeah.
It's been overlooked for several years.
I definitely heard you say this is a stopgap truck.
Yes.
So my opinion on it, you have engine 4 over here, which is a fairly new piece of truck. You've got 42 across the tracks, which is aging, falling apart. It's exceeding industry recommendations on when it should be replaced, and it stays out of service. The one over here, we're not asking to replace. We are asking to replace the one on Blue Ridge Road. This truck can go in tomorrow or in August and meet the needs, okay? To what Mr. Mayor was saying, we still need something that fully is built for this district and can do all the things necessary of this fire department. When that occurs, this truck is still going to be utilized. It doesn't matter whether we buy the worst fire truck in the country or the best fire truck in the country. They're going to break down. They're going to get hit on the interstate. They're going to get wrecked. Like, something will inevitably happen to where that truck is now out of service. We have to have something to still provide protection to the community when that occurs. And right now, when we have a truck that goes out of service, we don't have that. We're borrowing and begging and everything else to make that happen.
So if we get this truck, we've got 2 dependable trucks.
If we get this truck,
And so that we could send 2 dependable trucks out on a call, because that's what you require on a fire call. Not on a, EMS call, but on a fire call. So that the other truck that is the 2-seater would be used in reserve.
the problem with using that in the reserve is that you've got 3 people assigned to that 2-person truck. And as I mentioned earlier, that 2-person truck, when it is used in reserve, when they pull up to a fire, they have to get out of that truck and get dressed in somebody's yard before they go and potentially save
And you
someone's
generally do
life.
a wonderful job. We've got a great fire department. We've always had a great fire department. But I'm just trying to say that if we try to get all these different trucks out here, I mean, this is millions of dollars that we're end up talking about. And when we have less than 6 fires a month, the need for a backup, a 3rd truck, seems to be pretty limited.
Until you ask the person whose house is on fire one of those times that month. That's the problem.
But you only send 2 trucks out anyway. I'm just saying that, there's certain times that we've just got to have probabilities looked at on this. And that's all I'm saying. This board's going to buy a brand new truck for you.
Yes, sir.
You're going to have 2 great trucks, and this other truck is a good truck with the exception of that it only has 2 seats in it. Well, we've got other vehicles that could go to a fire if that needed to be, if we needed to get them in there.
And none of those people, the issue though with Mr. Mayor is that none of those people will be ready to fight fire when they arrived in that scenario with 2-person trucks. They pull up at someone's house, someone is in the window needing assistance because their whole first floor is on fire, and no one is ready to do that. With this truck,
Yeah, this truck and the other truck.
yeah, with these trucks, people are ready to do that. And with the amount of maintenance issues we have, with the amount of time that trucks are out of service, we feel that it is necessary 365 days a year to have somebody ready to immediately render life-saving care when they pull up and not have to get dressed beforehand.
And that's what you've been able to provide, correct?
With currently what we have, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's
So,
what I'm saying.
can I ask-
We've been able to provide that. Yes, go
Sorry, I
ahead.
didn't mean to interrupt you. So as I understand it, this is coming to us earlier than you had planned because you just have no choice. It's a really pretty dire situation.
Yes.
So as far as I know, all they're asking us to approve tonight is this.
Yes.
And when it comes to the other issues about future truck purchases, we're gonna have plenty of time to review that and consider what the needs of the town are at that time. So just to move this forward, I'm wondering if we could just stick to this one truck. And I appreciate the mayor's concerns, but we don't really need to figure out all that tonight. We can just deal with this.
Sounds good. Hear any motions?
So at first, I guess we need to reject I move to approve, no, wait, what am I moving?
Move to reject the bids.
I move to reject the bids as recommended by staff.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Okay. Do we have any more motions?
And now we would need to move to approve the purchase of, or the down payment.
Yeah, and however you want to do it. You know, like I said, I can bring the financing back in
Yeah,
July.
that's something that you could do later. It's just a
Absolutely.
matter of going ahead and getting the truck approved.
That's correct.
Getting the $300,000 deposit
That's correct.
and move forward.
That's
That's right.
absolutely right.
Excellent, excellent. Anybody want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we go ahead and approve the $300,000 down payment for the new truck.
And then let
And
Josh
then let Josh come
with
back with the financing part of it. Yeah, the options as far as financing is concerned.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
You're
you.
doing a good
Thank you.
job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
And then the last item of business, at least under new business, is 8E, which is traffic policy. This is pretty short. I think Councilmember Hay had brought this up to me a few times. I don't want to read this word for word to you, but really what it's going to get at is issues we have with traffic in town when they come to us as staff, whether those be no parking zone requests, one-way street requests, pedestrian treatment requests, speed control requests, or any other requests we may run into with public safety or traffic in general. We want to make sure that we've got something in place that tells us how we're going to deal with those requests. So under the responsibilities, we've got in there what we're going to do as far as staff goes. You know, anything that's done or it's going to be proposed to change is going to be going to impact the residents first before it comes to y'all, so we don't run into those issues that we have had in the past. So that way they've got an idea of what's going on. They'll feel informed and can come and speak at a council meeting if they choose to do so. Essentially, that's really the brunt of it, is making sure that we let folks know about things coming down the pike.
Thank you, Josh, for putting this together. And it all looks great to me. The one thing I noticed this morning, and I'm sorry I didn't give you time to think this through, but do we need to define impacted residents any further?
You know, actually, Savannah and I went back and forth with that. And we talked about, yes, potentially doing that. We just haven't figured out how to do that yet. But, you know, we're happy to figure that out and come back to you with another draft, or if you want to just let us deal with it, we can do that. But, and that's going to vary based on requests, right?
Sure. In some ways, I mean, that gives you room for
It gives
discretion.
me a little discretionary.
Also gives space for people to argue.
That's true.
So what would be most helpful from a staffing standpoint
From
on
a
that?
staffing standpoint, black and white are much better than gray.
Okay.
You know, because we've got our marching orders and we can move forward, but, that
So-
one may be a little bit challenging to define based on the type of request.
When you say staff, you're talking planning department?
I'm just, talking planning department or myself or public works or police or fire.
Sure.
We need to be involved in any of that.
And no matter what it is, number 5 carries the day. It's got to come to the town council.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
Yeah, the intent of this was really after the one-way discussion around Sutton, Ridgeway, right? You know, there was some residents expressed concern about not being notified or informed about that discussion ahead of time. And this was really a way to put a policy in place for staff to notify people when certain traffic changes are made, not to change who approves it or anything like that.
The only thing I might suggest be added is vehicle restrictions, like that time we had no large truck requests.
Up here under the overview.
Yeah.
Could you maybe provide some clarification on impacted residents, but still leave a little bit of discretionary gray area, so, you know,
Right now,
within.
on the fly? Is that
No,
what-
no, no, I'm saying, like, to bring this back before us.
I'm happy to do that.
So maybe, I don't know, the residents who live on that street or the
Sure,
neighborhood.
I'm happy to
street
do
or something. Okay.
Just could you possibly make that like whenever someone requests to have a street closed or a street opened, that everyone that lives on that street has to be notified?
I'll put that on here, Councilmember Tiller. I want to think that might be already in that,
Okay.
in that requirement, but maybe it's worth putting on here anyway.
Because like with the state, if someone requests to have a street paved, if one person on that street says no, then that street gets paved.
I'll put street closures / openings, because we do have right-of-way openings sometimes. Okay. What else? We good?
That's good.
I'll bring it back.
I want to make, do I hear a motion to go into closed session?
We're not, we're there yet.
Should we do updates?
Oh, that's right, yeah, we got to.
Y'all need to vote on the traffic
We have to
policy.
hear from you, Steve.
We vote on the traffic
Well-
policy.
I think we're gonna bring
So
that
we
back
vote
next
to
week.
postpone?
Okay.
Okay.
No public hearing, Steve.
As my last time around with a legislative update, the statute which will penalize municipalities by not having their annual audit done in a timely fashion did pass. At the end of 9 months after the end of your fiscal year, you'll get a notice if it isn't filed. If at the end of the next fiscal year, that annual report's not filed, you are consenting to them withholding a portion of your sales tax. The statute doesn't say what that portion is.
Oh,
Doesn't that make you feel better? As I said earlier, the short-term rental statute hung up in committee, didn't make changeover. There is one thing that didn't make the crossover date, but the Senate proceeded with it anyway. That was Senate Bill 675. That's the one that doesn't affect us, but that's the one that's going to take away ETJ for any municipality in a county with a population under 50,000.
It's gonna take away what?
ETJ from any town in a county having a population of 50,000. And you need not worry about implementing ETJ
I don't know what
going forward.
ETJ is.
Extraterritorial jurisdiction, where you can zone outside your city limits. That's gone. There will be no, until some future legislature puts it back, there'll be no new ETJs. Black Mountain has never had one, and so Black Mountain won't have one. But those are the big changes. Everything else that I've talked about over the last 3 months didn't make the crossover date, died in committee.
But crossover dates don't mean what they used to.
Not a
right?
thing, because the one I
But
just.
as legislature, they throw stuff in.
The one I
when
just
they want to.
described did not make crossover date, but they took it up anyway. Yeah.
All right, I'll be brief here. I want to recognize Savannah real quick. Savannah Parish Town Clerk of the Town of Black Mountain, North Carolina, has been awarded the prestigious designation of North Carolina Certified Municipal Clerk, referred to as NCCMC, from the North Carolina Association of Municipal Clerks, along with the School of Government at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, for achieving its high educational experience and service requirements. Ms. Parrish attained her designation as a North Carolina State Certified Municipal Clerk through the completion of the North Carolina Association of Municipal Clerks program conducted in cooperation with the School of Government of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So, two more quick things. Our budget hearing will be Wednesday at 5:30, and then we are observing Juneteenth on Friday this week. I think the county originally said Friday, and they changed to Monday. We never got that memo, so we're still observing Friday. And that's it for me.
Anybody got anything else?
I have a long list, but I'll keep it real short. I think Jamie's probably asleep, but I wanted to give his and his team a shout out. I know they were up all night last night working on the water leak. Also, I was thrilled to attend the opening of the book walk around Lake Tomahawk, and want to thank the Friends of Black Mountain Library and the Black Mountain Greenways and Trails Committee for organizing that. My kids have done the walk and read the book and had a good time. So that's great. And then I had the honor of playing in the golf tournament on Friday with the police department, and want to thank the chief for putting that on. It was very successful. And going back to parking very briefly, if we wanted to look into ways to encourage certain movement within downtown, is that something that we could do, that I could put in a formal request here tonight to do that, or we can talk later about that, but I don't know if there's interest from other people on the council, but I just want to reiterate that one more time. And then to thank Attorney Sneed for his service. It's been an honor and pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
I would like to add to that to thank Ron for his years of service. It felt like 1941, I'm sure, but you've done a great job, and not only for the town, but in your practice. It's been good for the town. I enjoyed working with you for many years as well. I'm happy that I don't have to now. Nothing against you.
Thanks.
And the chief, we didn't get our prize, our team.
I don't think you got one.
Okay, all right, that's what I was afraid.
Well, just to reiterate how much I've enjoyed working with you and how much I appreciate your guidance, and I learned a lot from you, and it's just been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not seeing anybody else wishing to speak. If I hear a motion, we go into executive session.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hmm?